CEO's mute daughter hits playgrounds at 3 a.m. Then this poor boy signs a shocking message. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the silent playground. It swings swaying gently, as if moved by a ghostly hand. At 3 a.m., the world outside was asleep, but not in this sinister corner of the neighborhood. The air felt thick, almost electric, like something was about to unfold. And in the shadows stood Mia, the CEO's mute daughter, her presence coiling around the darkness. Dressed in a pale white dress that fluttered in the breeze, she appeared like a phantom, both haunting and enchanting. The playground, with its peeling paint and misplaced echoes of laughter, suddenly seemed alive, holding its breath for what was to come. Mia's eyes darted around the empty swing set. There was something strange about her tonight. She was drawn here, as if by an invisible force, her fingers twitching with tension. Then, out of nowhere, a flicker of movement. A boy. He stumbled into the light, a few years younger than her, shivering as though he could sense the weight of unspoken secrets. Jake, with wild hair and a worried frown, felt the chill wrap around him, but the pull toward Mia was intoxicating. What were they doing here? It didn't make sense. Kids didn't wander alone in the dead of night, especially not to a playground. And yet, there was something magnetic in Mia's silence that called to Jake, pulling him closer one hesitant step at a time. He took a deep breath, his chest constricting as he felt a lump forming in his throat. What could possibly go wrong? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The atmosphere shifted as Jake stepped closer, the playground lights flickering ominously. Mia reached into her pocket, her fingers trembling, and pulled out a piece of paper. In the dim light, she began to draw. Lines, shapes, almost like a coded message. Jake could feel his heart racing, pounding in his chest like a drum, urging him to take the leap. What was she trying to tell him? What dark intentions lurked behind those expressive eyes? He leaned in, curiosity tugging at him, but questions swirled faster than he could grasp them. And then she looked up, her eyes wide, and pointed a finger at the paper, her face a mask of fear. Jake's mouth went dry. The message she showed him sent chills racing down his spine. Was it a warning? Or something far worse? And just when he thought he could decipher the secret in her gaze, a loud creak echoed through the playground, piercing the unsettling silence. The sound froze Jake in his tracks, his heart leaping into his throat. Mia's fingers recoiled as if scalded, and she instinctively stepped back, her eyes pinning him down like a wild animal caught in the headlights. The creaking seemed to resonate from the old slide, its metal groaning under the pressure of an unseen weight. What was that? Jake gasped, glancing around the playground, the shadows feeling thicker now, almost claustrophobic. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body betrayed him, rooted in place by a relentless pull toward Mia. He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat growing heavier, and took a tentative step forward. Mia's gaze darted toward the darkness beyond the swings, as if she sensed something lurking, something dangerous. Panic ignited in Jake's stomach. The paper slid from Mia's hands and fluttered to the ground. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, desperate to understand. But the playground seemed to pulse with life, the gentle rustle of the wind turning ominous. With a sudden force, a gust of air swept through the place, sending chills racing across Jake's skin, and that's when he saw it. A shadow loomed just beyond the reach of the flickering light. "Who's there?" Jake shouted, his voice echoing across the emptiness. He turned back to Mia, seeking reassurance in her wide, terrified eyes. They were filled with words she couldn't say, emotions she couldn't express. A terrifying thought settled in his mind. Was she trying to warn him? Then, as if summoned by his fear, the shadow stepped closer, revealing itself an older boy, tall and menacing, with dark eyes that gleamed like coal in the half-light. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his voice a low rumble that sent another wave of dread crashing over Jake. Mia's expression twisted into one of sheer panic. She stepped in front of Jake, her small frame a weak shield against the approaching threat. The message she had drawn earlier plagued Jake's thoughts, though he couldn't recall its exact shapes. But the urgency in Mia's movements mirrored the rising tension in the air. This wasn't just a chance encounter, it felt like a collision of fates. "I don't want any trouble," Jake stammered, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "We were just what?" The older boy interrupted, stepping closer. Jake could smell trouble, like smoke curling through the air. Before Jake could respond, Mia reached down to retrieve the fallen paper, her fingers delicately brushing over the scrawled lines as if trying to reinstate her silent message. But the older boy's eyes flickered to the paper, and a nasty grin split his face. "What's this? A little puppet show?" He lunged forward, snatching the paper from Mia's grasp. "Let us see what secrets this holds." Jake lunged for it, the instinct to protect Mia guiding his every move. The atmosphere snapped tight like a drawn bowstring, fraught with tension. Both boys collided, a jarring mess of limbs and panic, and then the paper ripped, a jagged tear slashing through Mia's message, sending pieces spiraling into the air. Mia gasped, her face paling as the shadows danced across her features. Something had shattered the fragile silence of those late-night hours, and now every second counted. "What did you hide in here?" The older boy sneered, gripping the remnants of the paper tightly. His eyes gleamed, a predator poised over his prey. Jake's heart raced. What was on that paper? And would they survive long enough to find out? As the playground settled into a thick, oppressive silence, a distant siren wailed in the background, sending shivers down Jake's spine. The stakes had escalated. They were no longer just kids caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was something darker lurking, and it was hungry. Was this the moment Mia's secrets would reveal themselves, or would it consume them both whole? Jake's heart pounded in his chest like a war drum as he squinted through the shadows. The older boy's glare was icy, cutting through the dark like a knife. With a swift motion, he crumpled the remnants of the paper in his fist, the noise sharp against the stillness. "You think this is a game?" he taunted, his voice low and menacing. Mia trembled beside Jake, her breath shallow, and he had to fight the urge to look at her again. He focused on the threat before him, sensing the danger rolling off the older boy in waves. There was a quiet intensity in the air, a tangible fear that wrapped around them like a cold fog. "Please," Jake managed to say, pushing his voice to sound steady. "Just give it back. We didn't mean to intrude, or anything, we were just curious." Each word felt heavy, like digging through gravel. His instincts warned him this was more than simple bullying. The older boy stepped closer, invading their space, and Jake could see a flicker of doubt cross his features. "Curious? Or were you trying to snoop? What did she draw? Speak up," he commanded, as if the demand alone could mount the fear inside them. "Leave us alone," Mia finally cried out, her small voice rising above the tension, surprising both Jake and the boy. Something fierce sparked within her, a fire that made her seem a little less like a frightened girl and more like someone who had a secret worth protecting. For a moment, the boy faltered, perhaps taken aback by the strength in her words or the fierceness of her spirit. But then, without warning, he laughed, a grating sound that echoed off the swings, dismissing her courage. "Cute, but pretty girls don't scare me." In that instant, Jake felt a swell of desperation. They were on the edge of something monumental. "It's not just a drawing," he blurted out, surprised by his own voice, the urgency pushing him forward. "She was trying to tell something important. Maybe you don't even want to know." Jake shocked himself with his boldness, but it seemed to catch the boy's interest. The look on his face shifted from mockery to a calculated curiosity. There was something there, buried beneath the bravado, a hunger for more. "Important?" the older boy echoed, dropping his attitude slightly as he narrowed his eyes in thought. "Like secret codes? Hidden treasure?" "More like," Mia started, but Jake cut her off, shaking his head frantically. He didn't want to put her in jeopardy, to risk everything for a moment of bravado. "Forget it. Just let us go, and we'll pretend this never happened." The taller boy stepped back, a strange smile creeping up on his face. "Where's the fun in that? Secrets are meant to be uncovered, after all." Suddenly, out of nowhere, a loud crash from nearby sent both boys jumping. An empty can tumbled from the darkness, rolling across the ground as if chased by a ghost. Panic rose like bile in Jake's throat. This was no accident. They weren't as alone as they thought. The older boy turned toward the sound, his expression shifting to something darker. Guess I'll have to wrap this up quickly. Then he grabbed Mia's arm, yanking her closer, a smirk playing on his lips. A new layer of fear crept in, and Jake realized time wasn't on their side. "Let her go?" he shouted, stepping forward, adrenaline coursing through him. He felt the weight of the world pressing down as he prepared to fight, but the older boy's expression shifted, turning wary. "You really think you can take me?" The playground loomed around them, shadows lengthening and entwining like serpents ready to strike at any moment. Jake's heart raced, each beat feeling like a countdown. What were they waiting for? Every second stretched thin, filled with possibilities of disaster. Then he noticed something unusual at Mia's feet, a small shard of the torn paper. Hope ignited in his chest. If he could reach it, maybe they could still find safety. But would he have the chance to grab it before chaos erupted? The air crackled with tension as he prepared for either an attack or a chance to plead for compromise. Just then, a chilling wind swept through, and Jake knew they had to make a choice: fight or flee into the night. What was that crash? And what else was lurking in those thick shadows? The wind howled now, whipping around them, a harbinger of trouble. Jake's instincts screamed at him as he eyed that piece of torn paper, feeling the urgency pulse through him like fire. Mia's frightened eyes darted between him and her captor, and he felt a sickening twist in his gut. "Mia, I'm going to get that paper," he whispered urgently, trying to keep his voice steady. But the older boy's grip on her tightened, and he could see the triumphant look in his eyes. "You think you can just walk away with something that doesn't belong to you?" The older boy taunted, pulling Mia closer, forcing her to stand right next to him. The closer they got, the more Jake felt both the pressure to act and the weight of fear. Each heartbeat felt like thunder echoing in a cave, no way out. Jake took a step forward, his heart thumping wildly. "Mia's not your toy?" He had to keep his voice strong, unwavering. He needed her to believe he could help them. Wavering now might make her slip away. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, and the older boy eyed him like a predator. "You think yelling is going to save her?" he challenged, eyes flashing with malice. That chilling wind blew again, and the darkness around the playground seemed to pulse like a living thing. Somewhere behind them, the shadows shifted, but Jake couldn't afford to look back. He needed to focus, and suddenly desperation crystallized into clarity. "Look," he said, modulating his tone. "It's not worth it. If you let her go, I'll tell you what the drawing means. I promise." The idea bloomed in his mind like a flickering flame. Maybe he could bargain. "It's not just about the hidden treasure or whatever. It's personal. You'd want to know." Interesting. The older boy narrowed his eyes, but Jake saw a flicker of hesitation. "What if you're just bluffing? What if this whole thing is a waste of my time?" Jake's gut twisted, knowing he had to take a gamble. "It's not. But we have to get her away from you first." With that, he threw caution to the wind and lunged forward. If he could get Mia away, leverage the situation, maybe they could find a way out. The older boy barely had time to react before the air crackled with intensity, the playground morphing into a battlefield. Mia gasped as Jake charged, her eyes wide with fear and surprise. The moment stretched, feeling like it could shatter, and everything fell into a fever-dream chaos as Jake lunged for the shard of paper, determined to bring it to the forefront. Suddenly, from behind, another sound pierced the night, a murmuring voice, sinister and foreign, like haunting music in the distance. It made him freeze mid-step. Mia's gaze flicked beyond the older boy, and Jake felt dread wash over him. They weren't just facing their captor now. "What was that?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled away from the older boy slightly, eyes wide. Jake's heart dropped as adrenaline surged through him. Shadows danced as the voice grew louder, echoing petty laughter and low words that sent chills racing down his spine. It wasn't just the boy. They weren't alone here in the darkness. "What the hell?" The older boy's expression shifted from arrogance to full-fledged fright, and for the first time, Jake felt something resembling confidence bloom inside him. Backing away slowly, the boy released Mia just enough to give Jake a glimpse of the paper, still lying ignored on the ground. But before he could react, the murmur materialized into a form, a figure stepping out of the shadows completely cloaked, An apparition summoned from the depths of darkness. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The situation he thought he could control spiraled into something darker, something beyond him. With urgency now mounting and shadows converging, he felt the breath of the unknown at his back. "Don't look back," Jake urged as he took a step towards Mia. "We need to get out." But as they began to move, the chilling figure raised a hand, commanding silence. What did it want? What was it trying to reveal? The night thickened around them, tension straining at every second. In that moment, Jake realized, whatever lay hidden in the shadows was more dangerous than either of them had ever imagined. What did it mean? And how would they escape this nightmare? The cloaked figure loomed, its presence like ice wrapping around Jake's heart. Time stretched as Mia's fearful eyes locked onto his, silently pleading for a way out. Jake steeled himself, ready to push through the suffocating fear that threatened to engulf them both. "Mia, just stay close," he whispered, trying to sound reassured, though doubt clung to his voice like a shadow. The older boy stumbled back, momentarily distracted by the dark apparition. "What is that?" he shouted, panic coloring his voice. Jake seized the moment. He dove toward the piece of paper, fingers trembling as they brushed against the torn edge. It felt like the heartbeat of the night, promising answers wrapped in danger. The cloaked entity shifted, a whisper of an ancient language slipping from its unseen lips. Jake's skin prickled with a sense of wrongness. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't just a figment of their fears. It was real, and it was hungry. With a frantic glance, Jake snatched the paper from the ground, pressing it to his chest. The older boy, now visibly shaken, gave an erratic laugh. "You think you can just take that? It belongs to enough." The apparition's voice boomed out, deep and echoing, sending a chill that cracked the air like thunder. The playground lights flickered, casting erratic shadows on the scene. Jake felt as if the ground beneath him pulsed with every syllable uttered by the figure. "Mia, run!" Jake shouted, breaking the spell that had held them captive for those endless seconds. She hesitated, her feet glued by a mixture of fear and disbelief. Now, that single word seemed to set her into motion. Without looking back, they sprinted away from the chaos, hearts thundering in sync as they dashed toward the playground's exit. Each footfall echoed like an alarm, warning them of the dangers still lurking behind. But just as they reached the chain-link fence, the air felt different. A heavy pressure settled around them, as if something was closing in. Jake turned his head slightly, catching a glimpse of the older boy retreating into the shadows, his face twisted with terror. "Mia, don't stop," Jake urged, panic clawing at his throat. They needed to reach the street, to merge with the safety of the world beyond this nightmare. But the voice from the cloaked figure returned, chilling him to the bone. "Not yet, children." Jake's pulse quickened. They couldn't afford to linger. They burst through the gap in the fence, skidding to a halt as they reached the streetlight's glow. The moment breathed sweetness, but it felt hollow. How far could they go when shadows lay in wait? "Mia," Jake turned to her, desperation etched into his features. "What do you know about that paper? Why does it matter so much?" She swallowed, shaking. I think it's connected to my dad's past. He mentioned something about lost treasure, but..." Her voice wavered, the weight of their situation making her falter. Before she could finish, a flicker of movement caught Jake's eye. The shrouded figure had followed, standing just beyond the edge of the light, its form shifting like smoke. "What do you want with us?" Jake shouted, his voice trembling but resolute. The apparition paused, then gestured, twisting its gnarled fingers, drawing an unseen shape in the air. Mia's face blanched. "Jake, I think it's showing us something." "But what?" With each passing second, Jake felt the pull of the shadows tugging at him, urging him to step back into that world of danger. The feeling of being watched crept in again, more insistent than before. "Mia, we have to make a choice. We can either run, or what? Face that thing." She interrupted, panic rising in her voice. But the weight of the torn paper felt heavier in Jake's grasp. He knew something profound lurked there, just beyond understanding. What truth was about to be revealed? As the cloaked figure shifted slowly, signing a message now using deliberate gestures, Jake's pulse quickened. What if their fate lay in deciphering the meaning behind those movements? "Jake, what if it knows?" she whispered, eyes wide with foreboding. The choice pressed in on them. the shadows swirling like a storm. To run would be to escape, but to stay could mean uncovering answers they desperately needed. But could they unlock the truth without succumbing to the darkness that beckoned? The night thickened, and as they hesitated, a distant siren wailed in the night, mixing with the whispers from the cloaked figure. Jake held his breath, knowing fate hung in the balance. What revelation awaited them, and could they handle what lay ahead? Mia shivered as the cloaked figure lifted its hand, shadows swirling like smoke around its outline. Jake's heart raced, caught between the urge to flee and the magnetic pull of the unknown. The paper crinkled in his grip, seeming to hum with energy, urging him to act. "Mia, we have to find out what it's saying," Jake blurted out before he could think better of it. Her eyes widened in horror. "Are you insane? That thing isn't here to play charades." Just then, the figure gestured again, its movements sharp and deliberate, pulling Jake's gaze into a trance. The air trembled, as if another world flickered behind the edges of reality. The figure pointed toward a spot just behind them, its features obscured by the shadows of the playground. Jake swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat that he strained to listen, heart pounding in time with the rustling leaves. "Can you see anything?" he asked, fear gnawing at his courage. Mia shook her head. "No, just flickers. It's like it's coming from everywhere and nowhere." The figure gestured again, more insistent this time. Its presence expanded like a balloon, filling the night air with an oppressive weight. Jake felt sweat bead on his brow. "Maybe it's trying to tell us something about the treasure?" "The treasure," Mia whispered, thoughts racing. "But what if it leads to the same fate as—" "Mia?" Jake's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "What if it can help us? What if it's a warning?" As if sensing the shift in the air, the cloaked figure suddenly dropped its arm, and an eerie silence filled the space, thick enough to suffocate. The shadows thickened, a chorus of whispers echoing in Jake's mind, each word impossible to grasp. "Enough!" The entity roared again, a sound deep and primal, shaking the ground beneath their feet. "You would seek knowledge, yet fear the consequences?" "Consequences?" Mia breathed, drawn in by a haunting curiosity, despite being rooted in terror. Jake squeezed her arm, almost pleading, but the figure's voice brought both terror and revelation. "Follow the path or be consumed by the darkness that is your fate." "Mia, it knows something. We can't ignore this. But what if we're not prepared for what comes next? What if we can't control it?" she argued, glancing back at the ominous figure cloaked in shadows. "No one has to know," Jake insisted, adrenaline fueling his resolve. "It's just us. We're already tied to this thing, whether we like it or not. Let us find out what this really means." Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer to the figure, the darkness closing in like a snare. Mia followed reluctantly, the paper pulsing in Jake's hand like a heartbeat mingling with his OW. As they approached, the figure began to twist its fingers once more, creating shapes in the air that sent ripples through the darkened playground. The shadows coalesced, revealing vague patterns that hinted at something monumental, a location, perhaps. "Can you see it?" Mia gasped, eyes widening as the shapes began to coalesce into a scene that felt familiar. It's the old sea diner, the one that's been abandoned." The weight of realization hit Jake like a freight train. "That's where it leads?" "It must wait. What if that's where the treasure is?" Just then, a loud crack echoed through the silent night, like thunder slamming down from the heavens. The figure pointed toward the street, where a new silhouette emerged, pixelated and hazy, more sinister than before. "Mia!" Jake shouted, finding renewed strength and urgency. But shadows danced around them, closing in not just from the cryptic figure, but from something more malevolent lurking farther back in the darkness. "Run!" Mia screamed, yanking at Jake's arm, just as their surroundings began to distort. Fear surged through him, fusing with determination. Heart racing, they turned and bolted toward the street, but the figure's chilling words echoed behind them, wrapping around their minds. "Seek the truth, if you dare. A choice waits at the dunes." As the night thickened, Jake felt the weight of destiny on his shoulders, a question forming on his lips. What awaited them at the dunes, and would they be ready to face whatever lay in wait? Jake and Mia sprinted down the street, each step driven by a rush of fear and adrenaline. The silhouette behind them stretched and contorted, as if the shadows were alive, hungry for their escape. Jake dared a glance over his shoulder, his breath hitching. The figure remained, a menacing shape lurking just out of reach, weaving silently like a predator in the night. "Mia," he shouted, pushing through the tightness in his chest. "We need to keep going." But she faltered, glancing back, eyes wide with terror. "Jake, what if it follows us? What if it knows where we're going?" He felt the grip of panic rising, but he couldn't let it take hold. "We can't stop now," it said the dunes. "It has to mean something." The air around them crackled with tension, and the wind whipped like fingers against their skin. They charged forward, soon turning onto a narrow path leading to the dunes. The moon cast a silvery glow, illuminating the sandy hills that rose before them, both inviting and daunting. Breathing heavily, they slowed as they reached the sand. The world felt eerily quiet, like the calm before a storm. It was a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Jake could see the waves crashing beyond, a distant roar that blended with the muffled whispers floating in his mind. He closed his eyes, trying to drown out the noise and focus on the task at hand. "What if we're wrong?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling like a fragile thread in the wind. "What if this was a mistake? Then we'll face it together," he replied, trying to muster confidence that fluttered just out of reach. The truth was, the closer they got to the dunes, the more he felt something pull at his insides, a creeping dread mingled with excitement. "We owe it to ourselves to find out what is happening." As they crested one of the smaller dunes, Jake's gaze swept across the landscape. In the soft, glowing light, he spotted shadows moving, shifting against the grain of the sand. The shapes morphed into familiar outlines, piles of discarded objects, remnants of previous beachgoers. But among them, there was something odd. A figure, darker than the night around it. "Mia, look." He gestured, pointing. She squinted, tracking his finger. The shadow flickered and danced, suggestive of some unsettling energy coiling around it. "Do you see it?" she asked, breath quickening. It looks alive." Heart pounding, Jake descended the dune and approached carefully. As they drew nearer, he could see it more clearly, a glimmer of metal jutting from the sands. It almost seemed to pulse, like it was waiting for them. "Is that a box?" Mia sounded awestruck. Jake crouched down, brushing the sand away, revealing a small, intricately designed box with strange, almost tribal symbols embossed on its surface. It felt warm to his touch, thrumming with an energy that sent shivers down his spine. "What do we do?" Mia asked, fear creeping back into her voice. This has to be what the figure was telling us about." He hesitated, transforming doubt into determination. "We have to open it." As he lifted the lid, a flash of blinding light erupted from within the box, washing over them and illuminating the surrounding dunes. For a split second, Jake felt weightless, like he was hovering between worlds. But then came the scream that a voice rang out from somewhere deep within the shadows, twisted with anguish and fury. It reverberated through the air, a chilling cry that sent a bolt of ice through their veins. "Mia, run!" Jake burst out, slamming the lid shut just as a rush of darkness surged towards them, wild and relentless. They didn't have the luxury of time. They turned, sprinting back toward the path, but the shadows were closer now, as if the dark had teeth, sharper and hungrier. "Jake, we can't let it catch us." Mia's scream echoed behind him, panic straining her voice. The shadows stretched out, reaching for them like clawing hands, and Jake felt the weight of that scream reverberate in his soul. What had they unleashed? With adrenaline fueling every step, they charged forward, hoping to escape the suffocating grip of the shadows. But the dunes were shifting beneath them, the ground rising like a living entity, and the terrifying realization struck him. They weren't just racing against time. They were in a fight for their very souls. "Keep running," he gasped, glancing at Mia, whose face was pale with terror. Where would they find safety? What horrors awaited them now? As they fled, desperate for answers, the darkness loomed ever closer. Feet pounding against the sand, Jake felt the darkness nipping at their heels, the suffocating dread tightening around him like a noose. The shadows swirled in a frenzy, and he could almost feel their cold breath brushing against his skin. He chanced to glance back. The figure that had haunted them was different now, more tangible, more real. A twisted mass of darkness, with eyes like black fire, burning with an unquenchable rage. "Mia," he shouted, "stay close." The roar of the ocean faded as they plunged deeper into the dunes, shifting and treacherous. Jake's lungs burned as he fought to keep the panic at bay. They needed a plan, something to turn the tide. "Is there anywhere to hide?" Mia's voice trembled, echoing his thoughts. "Over there." He pointed to a cluster of boulders tucked between two larger dunes. The shadows clawed at them, but they had no choice. It was either risk confrontation or try to vanish from sight. They sprinted toward the rocks, the world reducing to the rapid rhythm of their breaths and the pounding of their hearts. As they scrambled behind the boulders, Jake felt a momentary swell of relief. They were safe, for now. But it was short-lived, as the shadows writhed just outside their refuge. Muffled thuds resonated in the silence, the shadows thrashing and snarling like a cornered beast. Jake pressed his back against the cool stone, feeling its weight, its stability. It contrasted sharply with the uncertainty swirling within him. "What if it finds us?" Mia whispered, her voice quaking. "We need to think," Jake replied, forcing steadiness into his tone. "We opened something we shouldn't have. What if that box was meant to stay closed?" A ghostly howl echoed, sending a shiver down their spines, as if the universe was mocking their every thought. "What was that scream, Jake?" Mia's eyes glimmered with fear. It felt like it was calling to us. He could feel the weight of the situation suffocating him. "Whatever it was, it's angry now. We need to figure out how to send it back where it came from." As they caught their breaths, Jake's attention turned to the symbols on the box, etched in his memory a subtle formula for understanding. The symbols. They must mean something. There has to be a way to close it, to reverse suddenly. The shadows flared violently, and Jake's heart raced. He leaned in closer to Mia, whispering desperately, "We're going to have to take a risk. We can't just wait here." With nowhere left to turn, they edged back out from behind the boulders. The shadows loomed large, and with trembling hands, Jake pulled out his phone, the only source of light against the growing darkness. He shone it toward the writhing mass, illuminating the fear that clung to Mia's face. "Jake, what if we can't stop it? What if it gets us?" She breathed, deadly serious, but he felt an unfamiliar spark of resolve. They could outsmart it. "We're stronger together," he declared, the words igniting fleeting courage within him. If we keep our wits about us. Before he could finish, a shadow lunged, the cold tendrils of darkness wrapping around him, pulling him into an abyss of despair. "Mia." The word tore from him, desperation clawing at his throat as he struggled against the chilling grip. With a fierce determination, Mia lunged forward, her small frame seemingly insignificant against the towering shadow. "Get away from him," she screamed, ripping at the darkness as if it was tangible. In that moment, a bright flash erupted from the box. They both turned, captivated. The symbols were glowing, pulsing with energy, as if reacting to their combined strength. The scream from the shadows intensified, frenzied chaos swirling all around them. "Mia, we need to focus on it," Jake shouted, straining against the darkness that sought to suffocate him. "If we can harness that power, we might." But before he could finish, the ground beneath them quaked. The dunes started to shift violently, and Jake felt the balance of their reality unraveling. As he fought to pull free from the shadow's grasp, a flicker of hope surged. Was there a way to turn the tides? They were close, too close. And just when it seemed they would finally overcome the chaos, the shadows pulled tighter, as if sensing their resolve. "Hold on," he yelled, pulling Mia back toward him. But in that instant, the figure twisted, and two piercing eyes locked onto his, promising nothing less than despair. What had they awakened, and could they ever escape its grasp? In that moment between hope and fear, the truth began to unravel. The earth beneath Jake's feet felt alive, shifting like a living entity, as the darkness roared and writhed against him. Jake's heart raced as the desert of shadows collapsed beneath him, and for a fleeting moment, he felt pure terror rising in his throat. He could see the darkness screeching, twisting, reaching for them with tendrils slick as oil, but the glow from the box pulsed with undeniable fire, cutting through the despair like a lighthouse amidst a storm. A flicker of light ignited Jake's hope. If they stuck together, they could face it. "Mia, hold my hand tight," he shouted, squeezing her fingers, feeling her warmth against the chill of fear. Together, they pressed against the onslaught of shadows, their voices rising in tandem. Arcale. The words rolled off their tongues like a shared incantation, the very foundation of their bravery. The ground quaked with every syllable, thrumming with a power that seemed to answer their call. The shadows writhed and hissed, their forms contorting in a desperate dance of defiance. "Keep going, we can do this," Jake shouted with determination, his voice steady even as the world crumbled. What remained of the darkness convulsed violently, and he caught a fleeting glimpse of the torment within it, a swirling mass of regret, anger, and sorrow wrapped in a monstrous shape. "You cannot bind me," it screamed, the sound echoing like a death knell in the air. The shadows twitched, as if reality itself was bending to the forces they had unleashed. But amidst the chaos, Jake found clarity in the understanding that this wasn't merely a battle between light and dark. It was a struggle for truth, for freedom from the very chains that bound them. The energy thrumming from the box surged higher, illuminating the sandy expanse in brilliant shades of azure and gold. "Together," he cried, the command resonating deep within them. "Let it go?" The shadows recoiled, an unseen force attempting to drag them back into the depths. Jake leaned into the light, feeling its warmth envelop him, infusing his resolve. He could hear Mia chanting along with him, their harmonized voices wielding strength like a rallying cry. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted violently. They stumbled as Jake rested a look around, heart hammering. He glimpsed the shadows twisting and contorting, their fierce roar losing grip, as if dragged toward the light. The luminous energy around them intensified, spiraling into a vortex of power that surged higher and higher above their heads, carrying with it every ounce of hope and defiance they possessed. "Mia," his attention snapped back to her. "Focus. We're almost there." Trembling with fear and strength, they raised their free hands to the entity, pouring everything they had into the symbols glowing on the box. "Arcale," they shouted in unison, the spell transforming into a crescendo of power, stretching through the air like lightning igniting the night sky. In an instant, the clash reached its peak. A stunning explosion of light erupted, rippling outward. The tendrils of shadows screamed, piercing the air with a sound of anguish and fury, as they ignited and disintegrated before their very eyes. Jake squeezed his eyes shut against the blinding burst, the sensation both exhilarating and terrifying. The howls of the darkness grew fainter, the suffocating weight lifting as the blurring line between light and dark began to unravel. And then, just as instantaneously, everything fell silent. Jake opened his eyes, heart clenched. They found themselves standing under the expansive sky, the stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across velvet darkness. The weight of fear melted away, replaced by a surge of disbelief surging through him. The shadows were gone, vanished like mist in the dawn, leaving only the soft echoes of their shared fear behind. Mia collapsed against him, breathing heavily, her face flushed with a mix of terror and euphoria. Did we really do it?" Jake nodded, feeling a warmth bloom in his chest. "We did. We faced it all." As the enormity of the moment washed over them, he realized this wasn't just about overcoming darkness. It was about discovering the light they held within, finding strength in one another, and realizing that secrets don't just bind us, they can also forge bonds stronger than any shadow. They turned toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn began to break, casting a warm glow over everything. The lingering shadows of that eerie playground faded in the light of the day, giving way to the sounds of life waking up around them. As the dawn washed over them, Jake felt the burden lift from their shoulders. "Let us promise this," he said earnestly, eyes shining with promise. "No more secrets. No more running from the past. Together, we'll face whatever comes next." Mia smiled, her eyes sparkling with understanding. "Together," she whispered, and in that moment, an undeniable bond solidified between them. With hands tightly held, they turned, ready to face whatever adventures awaited them in the light of day. Those shadows may have haunted them, but no longer would they dictate their life. They had conquered their fears, and now they were free to embark on a new journey, the dawn rising ahead, full of possibilities. And as Jake looked back at the playground, now nothing more than relics of the night, he understood the message. The darkness could no longer govern them. United in light, they would always find their way. If you enjoyed this thrilling conclusion, don't wait a second longer. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on more exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support is everything. Flood the comments below, sharing your reactions and theories about what just happened. And remember, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this epic ending. You have the power to help grow this community. Let us make it happen.